why passwords are actually important. I'm talking about this because bad computer password habits continue to be a problem in computer security, but the training and solutions that get put into place focus mostly on browbeating people until they agree with you. Cannot create an account because your password must contain a capital letter, and that doesn't work. I mean, it's great for stopping children from eating crayons, but it's woefully inadequate for something as complicated and nuanced as computer security. What's worse, the things people are being browbeaten for are, at best, tangentially related to the real problems surrounding passwords. There's an impression that if only your password is long enough or it has enough special characters that you'll be safe, and that's not true. And to be sure, long and complicated passwords are valuable, but there's more to the story than just that, and I want to tell the other part. To understand why passwords are important, you need to understand a little about how computers work and how they're made secure. And that can be a whole can of worms. Computer security is intimidating, made worse by ridiculous depictions of hacking in modern media. It's absurd to suggest that everyone become a computer security expert before they create their first account, just like it's absurd to suggest that everyone become an auto mechanic before they're allowed to drive. But if you're driving a car, there's value in knowing how to change a tire. Before we get into passwords, though, I want to make sure no one's under the mistaken impression that they can just wait them out. Passwords have a long and interesting history, arguably starting as far back as the Romans, who used watchwords to pass military orders among troops. But passwords really took off with computers. Shortly thereafter, they began to be hated. People have been predicting the end of passwords for a long time, but the problem is that any alternative must do everything that passwords can do. Nothing comes close. How many iris scanners do you own? Could you trace a pattern along a picture a month after your last login? And if you log in with just your smartphone, what happens when that gets stolen? To be sure, the future will have a lot of alternative authentication methods alongside passwords to increase security and to make it easier to re-log in. We're going to see more credentials stored in web browsers and more leveraging of smartphones, but passwords will always be there. Defending that vision of the future would probably be a TED Talk in itself. So if you don't believe me, I say, too bad. Deal with it. Because you don't have a choice in the matter. You're forced to use whatever authentication method was chosen by the people who developed the system you want to use. And today, passwords are it. So how do computers use passwords? Let's start mid-story. You've browsed to a website that you occasionally visit, and you're at the login page. You type your username and password and press enter. And your computer takes that username and password and puts it into a standard form that's called a post request. This form has a spot for your computer to fill its name, where it's going, what language it's using, a bunch of other stuff. And then it has a section called content. Your computer takes your username and password and puts it into that content section. And then it sends it off to the server. And this is in plain text, which is human readable. So by this time, your computer and the server have generally created a secure connection called HTTPS. So at either side of that tube right there, it's going to be human readable, but along that tube, no one can see anything about your communication with the server. So no real risk in passwords there as it's traveling. But what happens when the server gets your password? Well, you don't know. You can't know unless the person who owns the server tells you, or you break the law and access the server in an unauthorized manner. Somehow, through some unknowable method, the server determines if you got your password right. And now we're back into the realm of the knowable. If it determines you got it right, it sends you a long random number that your computer sends with future requests so that you don't have to log in again, and so you can post your picture of a cat. If you got it wrong, then maybe it sends you back to the login page with an option to reset your password. And that's the end of this particular authentication story. But the reason passwords are important are in that big yellow question mark. So let's talk about some things it could be. It could just be a big table with one column for your username and another column for your password. That's what they did in the early days of computing, and it's what a lot of sites still do. And it works, and it may not be immediately apparent why it's insecure, because you can set a rule on that table that the only people who can access it are the people who own and operate the website and the web server itself. Now, the people who run the website, this website is their livelihood. They can go in and see your password just as easily as they can go change your picture of a cat to a picture of a dog and add the subtitle, "Dogs Rule, Cats Drool." But they're generally not going to do that because they're usually more mature than 12-year-olds, and because doing that would be a horrible violation of their users' trust, and they don't want to go out of business. It's just not worth the effort of having to find another job. Until it isn't. Until an employee realizes they can make a lot of money selling that list of usernames and passwords on the black market. or a disgruntled employee is angry about being passed over for a raise, or someone has an ex-girlfriend who joins the site, or any one of a million other reasons. So there's one risk. The web server itself also has to be able to access this list of usernames and passwords so that it can check if the username and password it was given matches. And it does this in very structured ways. You recall the post request was like a form that had a place for your username and a place for your password. Well, all the server can do is check to see if those two fields match what it has. So the only thing anyone can do through the server is to ask the server, does this username and password match what you have? And they get told yes or no. And that's all the information they can get out of the server because that's all it's programmed to do. Until it isn't. Until a mistake made by a developer allows a hacker to access that list of passwords. And web development is so easy nowadays, you don't have to know anything about computer security to do it. Sarcasm aside, storing passwords in plain text is no good because good computer security relies on multiple layers of defense. So what are the alternatives? Well, encryption's no good either, because the server would have to know how to decrypt the list of passwords. It would have to have the decryption key. And if bad guys are going to be able to access that list, that encrypted list of usernames and passwords, they're probably also going to be able to access that decryption key. Never write your own is a core rule of cryptography. If you could come up with an algorithm for storing passwords better than what's currently out there, you're probably going to get yourself a PhD and a whole lot of money. Security through obscurity, that is, relying on keeping your cryptographic method secret, is also no good, as the Germans discovered with their Enigma machine in World War II. So the answer is hashing. That is a mathematical function where it's proven that even if you know the function and you know the output, there's no way to determine the input. So when someone sets their password, you run it through the function and only store the output. Then, when they try to log in, you take the password they gave you, run it through the same function, and if the outputs match, you know that they provided the same password. That way, when the hackers get a hold of the password table, all they have are those hashed values. There's no way for them to take those hash values and figure out what people's passwords actually are. Until there is. Now, there's no mathematical function that they can run these hash values through to get the input, but there's nothing stopping them from guessing what your password was, running it through the function, and seeing if the outputs matched. $50 today would buy you the top supercomputer in the world of 1996. $600 today would get you on the top supercomputer list of 2007. So with their own little supercomputers, bad guys can make billions of guesses per second against this hashed password list if it was using a fast hashing algorithm. And that's the biggest point today where having a good password is important, is that a website you've registered on that was using a fast hashing algorithm has been compromised, and bad guys are making billions of guesses per second against that list trying to figure out your password. Now, there are algorithms that are specifically designed for storing passwords that are purposefully slow, that instead of guessing billions of passwords a second, bad guys can only guess dozens of passwords a second. And that's the difference between figuring out your password in a few seconds versus figuring out it in a few millennia. But most developers aren't doing this. I guarantee you that most of your accounts today have their passwords being stored in an insecure manner. Developers don't have the knowledge or spend the time to implement them, instead opting for the fast password hashing solutions because they're easier to implement and because they think that they're good enough, even though they're actually not. The reason they're doing this is not so that they can log back into the website with those credentials that they've stolen. They're going to try those credentials on other sites. If your phone company, for instance, probably has protected itself against the most basic types of hacking, but if you're using the same username and password on a less secure site, you might still see calls to 900 numbers placed on your account. If those credentials work on Amazon, bad guys could probably order anything and have it shipped anywhere. They might even be able to steal money directly from you if those credentials work on PayPal or bank websites. It comes down to digital identity theft. And that's hundreds of billions of dollars lost each year. But I said I was getting away from browbeating. So rather than trying to make you feel guilty about enabling identity theft, I want to talk about what would happen to you if your online identity was stolen. Banks are pretty good about not holding you responsible for fraudulent transactions, so it really comes down more to time. How much time would it take if all of your email accounts were stolen? How would you go about getting them back? Do you even know? Or would it be easier to go to every site you've registered on and update your email address? Some celebrities recently discovered the woes of online cloud storage when all of their pictures were compromised. Would you even know how to detect if a bank account was opened in your name on the opposite side of the world? It calls for balance. Just like how you don't have to be an auto mechanic to drive a car, you should follow computer security practices that are at a level on par with how valuable your online identity is. And it doesn't have to be super extreme. My grandmother got sick of Facebook very quickly. She's perfectly happy using her computer to just check Fox News and play solitaire. So, based on how valuable your online identity is, you should learn and practice computer security along those lines. And it's not just passwords either. You should do things like enabling two-factor authentication, changing the password reset questions from mother's maiden name, using made-up answers for those. And this is all under the umbrella of computer security in general, which includes things like not clicking on suspicious links or keeping your software up to date. So, we talked about if your online identity is not super important, perhaps you don't need an extreme solution. So here's this in-extreme solution. Low tier is to memorize a few passwords and use one password for those secure sites like your bank or your email, and another password for sites where you post cat pictures. Make them good passwords, but most important is that they don't match between those places where you're doing financial transactions and the places that you don't really care about. The second tier is to start with those base passwords, but modify them in a predictable pattern. So, for instance, grab the second and fourth letters of the website name and add it to the end of your password. That'd be like the A and E of Facebook, added to the end of the base password. And this gives you a unique password for every site. But I've had a lot of developers come up to me and tell me that that is sufficient, that if one of their accounts gets compromised, since it has a different password than their other accounts, that the other accounts aren't at risk. And that's just not true. Password cracking's been advancing at an extraordinary rate lately. Bad guys aren't just starting at AAAA and guessing everything up to ZZZZ anymore. They're incorporating common tricks that people use, like capitalizing the first letter, changing S's to dollar signs, and adding numbers to the end. And they're using dictionaries that have everything from fictional character names to Bible verses. Especially if your online identity is important, you are going to have someone looking at your username and password in plain text and trying to figure out how they can benefit themselves with your credentials. And if they can compile information from multiple leaks, any algorithm you have for modifying your password is going to be vulnerable to reverse engineering. The only solution, the real solution, is to use password management software. That's a program that's going to remember your password for you. It's going to generate long, random, unique passwords for every site. It's going to automatically type them into the websites as you visit them. And it's going to store it all behind strong encryption. It's a big change for a lot of people, but so were seatbelts. So I hear some common objections to password managers. For instance, wouldn't it be great if you were a hacker and you made a password management program to get everyone's credentials? Well, you're going to have to trust someone. And if you're not trusting your password management program, then you're going to have to trust someone's, as in everyone who owns and operates the websites that you visit. And when the least secure of them gets compromised, your other accounts are at risk. So if you stick with the long-established, the popular password managers like KeePass, LastPass, and 1Password, they've been around 6 to 11 years. It would be a pretty impressive long con if they were actually bad guys in disguise. Other objections, perhaps it's inconvenient, but you'd be surprised at how flexible and powerful modern password managers are. They will sync between computers, work across operating systems. And if you have a smartphone, you can even get it to sync on your device, so that when you're over at a friend's house, you can get that long, random password the program generated for you and log on to Facebook. Worried about putting all your eggs in one basket? That's a really secure basket. You remember how I talked about those fast hashing algorithms and how there were alternative slow algorithms? Well, if you get some malware on your computer or your smartphone and people steal your password database, they'll be up against similarly slow algorithms trying to crack it. So those are the most common objections to password managers. But if you're still not convinced, I'd encourage you to go online and look more into it. This is a conclusion that a growing number of security experts are reaching. And if you have a concern, chances are that it's already been addressed. Thank you.